There's some video of some presumably individual with, in this case, silly colored hair. Take it away.
There is no such thing as a natural born woman. Period. Because no woman comes out of the womb fully formed as a woman. In fact, gender concepts don't sink into children until they are old enough to learn shame. And the only reason why children stay on one side of a binary is out of shame. Now, when looking at the ego and the id does not care what your gender is. It is your primal instincts. It is your need to live, your need to breathe, your need to eat. But your ego defines itself in the world while it is around the people that gives it more meaning to itself. Now, your ego is rational, and it is the thing that is able to define itself in the larger picture, but when we are babies, we don't have that ego. We just have the id, and no one is a woman at that point. No one is a man. All you are primal instincts making you need, want, and scream.
Freud and his consequences have been a disaster for the human race. This person is doing a SparkNotes version of One Day Lesson on Freud.
All you are primal instincts.
Which is why he's referring to the id and the ego and presumably the superego. And he makes a mistake here. I think it's a he.
No one is a man.
It's confusing these days. I think it's a he.
Wrong.
He makes a couple of mistakes. The first one is he says, sex doesn't set in until shame does. And, little kids don't have shame. That's not true. Little kids do have shame. If you've ever spent time with little kids, if you have kids yourself, the kids can be very ashamed. Sometimes kids don't want to go use the potty, even when they're very, very little. Sometimes kids, if they break something, if they do something and, mommy or daddy reprimands them, they kind of, get a little flustered or they kind of look down. Shame sets in pretty early. And this guy's referring to shame as being a bad thing. But shame is shame is just like the nerve endings in your hand. When you put your hand on a stove, you feel pain. That pain is it's unpleasant perhaps, but it's a good thing because it tells you you're doing something that's harmful to you.
Touch the stove!
Well, shame is like that as well. Shame is like that in just a slightly more abstracted way. But shame is a reminder that you're doing something that is shameful, that is not good for you, and you ought to stop doing it. The more fundamental error this guy's making is he's suggesting that sex depends on perception. So what he's not saying you don't have a sex. He thinks he's saying you don't have a sex back when you're just a little baby with an id and you haven't understood
and internalized the demands of the ego and the superego yet.
But that presumes that sex depends upon your perception of sex.
Huh?
Which, when you put it that way, is obviously incoherent.
What?
Because if sex depended upon your perception of sex, then you would not be able to perceive anything, because the perception would come before the sex.
Oh. Okay.
What we are acknowledging here is that you perceive the sex at a certain point in your development, so the sex has to precede the perception, which it obviously does too, because we know that you are born, and before you can consciously conceive of things and even perceive things, you have certain genitals, you have certain chromosomes. You are one sex or the other. So he's just getting the order of things reversed. Keep going.
This is where transphobe and TERF ideology crumbles. To reiterate, you are not a woman and you are not a man when you are born. You are just the id. You are a bundle of screaming flesh that wants to eat and poop and sleep. That's all you are.
Well, you are that, and you are more than that. You also are a blonde-haired person. You also are a blue-eyed person. You also are white or black or Asian.
I'm a land farmer, motherfucker!
You also are male or female. You are those things. Even if you're not aware of your hair color, you're not aware of your eye color, you're not aware of your race, you're not aware of your sex. Nevertheless, those attributes still pertain to you, whether you are aware of them or not. Keep going.
There is a difference between internal and external genitals, but do you as an id know or even care about that? No. The only things you, as the id, care about at that point of your life is to sleep, to eat, to poop, to repeat.
But again, then, to quote a friend of mine, facts don't care about your feelings. Just because you don't care about something doesn't mean that that thing isn't real. He's trying to prove the trans anthropology by presuming the trans anthropology, which is that all that really matters about your identity is what you consciously care about. But that's an error in logic called begging the question. Keep going.
To repeat, that's it. That's all you care about. So as a natural born anything, you are a virus. And as a virus, once you hit maturity, you have 3 goals: to attack, to consume, to procreate.
I have other goals. I mean, I'm not saying I don't. In some cases, I suppose I would do those things, but I also write. I play the ukulele. That would be another goal of mine. I contemplate the cosmos and my place in it. That would be another goal of mine. He's just trying so hard here. He's trying to impose his mostly materialist ideology on everyone, but none of us really believes that. We all have different goals. And we have higher goals too. I mean, ultimately, the goal of our existence, the purpose of life, is to know God and to give him the service and worship that he is due on earth and to enjoy him forever in heaven. He might dispute that if he's really peddling a kind of materialist and incoherent view of humanity. There's no reason to believe that his argument is any more convincing than mine. And in fact, my ultimate view of things is more compelling, I think, and has been more compelling throughout history than his is. But he's just, he's still trying to cram that early 20th century, late 19th century materialism down everyone's throats. And I think it's going to be less and less persuasive because people have moved on from that ideological error. Right now, head on over to expressvpn/Michael, letter Y, letter T. Using the internet without ExpressVPN, it's like not paying attention to the safety demonstration on a flight. Most of the time, you're probably fine. But then one day, that weird yellow mask is going to drop down from overhead. You're going to have no idea what to do. Better be safe than sorry. That is why I strongly recommend you use ExpressVPN. Every time you connect to an unencrypted network in cafes, hotels, airports, a hacker on the same network can access your personal data, your password, your financial details. These hackers can make up to $1,000 per person selling personal info on the dark web. ExpressVPN creates a secure, encrypted tunnel between your device and the internet so that hackers can't steal your sensitive data. ExpressVPN is easy to use. Just fire up the app, click one button, get protected. Plus, it works on all devices, including phones, laptops, tablets, and more, so you can stay secure on the go. Secure your online data today. ExpressVPN.com/Michael, letter Y, letter T. EXPRESSVPN.com/Michael, letter Y, letter T. You can get an extra 3 months free. ExpressVPN.com/Michael, letter Y, letter T.
We have assigned ourselves the ego in order to differentiate ourselves to our peers around us, our fellow viruses.
I'm a virus.
Did say,
I'm not a virus.
Un à toi. I is someone else, which means the ego and the id are 2 different identities inside.
À toi? I don't think that's how it's pronounced.
Do not exist simultaneously. They may assist each other in their existence, but they are not the same. Your ego is not defined by the id, and your id was here before your ego. Thus, when you say natural born woman, you are completely and irrevocably wrong.
Well, anyway, that's one account of human nature. I don't think a very precise one, but he undermines his own point, because even presuming all of the Freudian language of the id and the ego and everything, and even taking his logic as it, if the other premise that he has here is that you are most really what you were previously. You are more id than ego because the id precedes the ego. Even if you accept that argument, he undermines his own argument here, because your body precedes your id, right? You are a being at conception with matter and with a soul, because we're hylomorphic beings. But even if this guy doesn't want to accept or really deal with the existence of the soul, he would certainly have to admit that you are not conscious at the moment of conception. That you are physically developing before you are consciously developing. Even before the id exists, you are growing, you are developing. And your sex is part of that. Your sex is identifiable before your id or the ego or the superego or whatever are identifiable. So even according to this guy's own, deeply flawed view of human nature, even then, this argument falls apart. because it always falls apart. Because any way you slice it, it's why the libs always have to kind of change the arguments about trans. They say, you can identify transgenderism in brain scans. Or they'll say, actually, it's not in the physical body at all. It's totally metaphysical, so forget about the brain scans. Or actually, it's here, it's there. But they have to keep moving the goalposts, because any way you try to defend the gender argument, it falls apart.
Sounds like someone here's a transphobe.